This is 5 Live.
Good morning. Who's fueling who? Is Muslim extremism being fueled by groups like the English Defence League, or is the English Defence League growing because of extremism? West Midlands Police tell us that EDL's activities are creating the terrorists of the future by radicalising Muslims. No, we're not, says the EDL. More and more people are joining our ranks because of Islamic extremism. Who's right? Who's fueling who? Chris is in Luton. Nasser is in Watford, and we're going to speak to Khalid Anis, who's a dentist from Altrincham. We broadcast from his home a few years ago, friend of the programme. Khalid, good morning.
Good morning, Nicky.
Chris, what would you like to say first off?
Well, I think that they're certainly encouraging... it's hard to say Muslim extremism. I mean, groups like El Marouge, who were banned after, you know, they demonstrated when the Anglia regiment came home.
Yeah.
People, I don't think they can understand why they should be banned. I mean, despite what they say being unpalatable, because the EDL, they know in Luton that the Muslim community have tried to drive El Marouge out, and all it does is give them more support. And EDL, they basically are fueling it, and they want to fuel it, and they're looking for a ruck, basically. Every time, wherever they go, it's been seen time and time again. You only have to look on YouTube what happens with them. And, you know, I just think it's incredibly... I mean, to be honest, I think there was a certain amount of racism anyway, and now they're fueling it. And there's people who don't understand what the EDL are about. They're far right, ex-BNP, some of them, and, you know, at the end of the day, they're trying to make out they're being reasonable, and it's because they're patriotic. Well, how come then they go and break the law every time they go to towns and cities and wreck the place?
Nasser in Watford, hi. Chris, stay there. Morning, Nasser.
Good morning, sir. Yeah, I just want to say basically the same thing. I think no one's fueling anyone. It just both have an agenda. The Al-Muhajirun is a group which call themselves Islamic, but they're just ignorant, misguided people.
Indeed, but it isn't. That may be the case, but isn't there the scenario here that extremist Islam groups like Muhajirun have a narrative about the West? They believe the West is... all in the West are against them. They're against Islam. They're trying to crush Islam. And they point to the EDL and they say, look, that proves it. Look at them. And the EDL has a narrative that Islam is trying to crush the West and go for world domination. And they point at Muhajirun and they say, look, that proves it. So in that sense, each is fueling the other.
I understand what you're saying. But the reality is, for example, EDL, the guy who came on, the leader who you spoke to before.
Tommy Robinson.
He was taking quotations out of the Quran, and he's very ignorant of the Quran because, you know, he look at the Quran, and when he's saying that the Quran says that wherever you find a disbeliever, kill him, and he's taking other things, he's taking them out of context because he doesn't know that that's a story about the time of the Prophet Muhammad, you know. It's not about today that wherever you find disbeliever, kill him. That was a peace treaty between the people of Makkah and Medina, which was broken, and that was said at that time. It's got nothing to do with today. And even the Jews and Christians cannot be friends. That's what the Quran says. He's totally taking things out of context because that was in Medina. There were some Jews and some Christians who were plotting as a prophet. So that was telling the prophet, the God was telling the prophet that, you know, be careful of them, don't trust them, you know.
If this is the word... If it's, I suppose some would say, if it's a word of God, though, why wasn't God more careful that these things didn't go in the book that might well have been taken out of context?
No, that's because it's every person's job to find out what the Quran is.
So slay the idolaters wherever you find them, take them captive, besiege them, prepare for them each ambush doesn't actually mean that.
No,
in
it's just
sense.
like, for example, if the British Army goes into a country and it will tell its soldiers, the general will tell its soldiers, look, you know, you've got to be careful here.
It's very warlike. It's very warlike stuff, though, isn't it?
Yeah, because there was a fight going on between Makkah and Medina at that time.
Right. Okay. Stay there, Nasser. It's good to have you on. Julia's in Chiswick. You support the EDL. Why?
Well, I wouldn't say I support the EDL. What I was trying to get across was I get really frustrated with the fact that we are a Christian nation. Fundamentally, we are a Christian nation. We embrace all faiths, all creeds. We welcome everybody. Absolutely. And I have all kinds of creeds of friends, and it's not a problem for me. But why do we then say that we have to pussyfoot around and tiptoe around these extremists? People seem to be afraid of them. Why are we afraid of arresting people who are burning poppies on Armistice Day? Whereas
this is totally wrong. You're right, 100%.
On Twitter, and I could post the wrong thing on Twitter and be arrested. You know, there's
Yes, you're right.
There's no parity here.
Yes.
You know,
That is because these
it's
people...
too unbalanced.
Nasser?
That's because the problem is the media looks at the people who call themselves Muslim, like al-Muhajirin, who do bad things, and the people think all Muslims like this. But the reality is these people are in a very, very few minority. They don't have any representation in any mosque, right? They are not the true representative of any Muslim.
The problem is, Khalid, join us here, and you know there is a problem with some of the elders in Muslim communities. Good morning, Khalid, again.
Good morning, Nicky.
For example, you know, and this is what Tommy Robinson from the EDL, and many people were horrified by much of what he said earlier, and I know you didn't catch it, but he was on, and he did make the point that there are so-called community leaders who come out with the most outrageous stuff, and we're not talking about the Muhajiruns, I can never say that, of this world. Dr. Mohammed Masin, one of the elder statesmen of Islam in Britain, from the Birmingham Central Mosque, the Muslim Council of Britain, he thinks that 7/7 was the British government were behind 7/7. Now, I mean,
Nicky,
please.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Please, that's why exactly the statement that I was thinking.
Yeah.
Listen, first of all, Dr. Nassim has been in Birmingham for eons. I was at university there, and he was about to retire when I was there. That was many moons ago, and I don't think he represents the MCB. So, you know, I think that's one distinction. And I'm afraid we all have nutters within our communities. I mean, that's just the case. It just so happens that the nutters within the Muslim community get airtime because people want to hear what they say.
He's an elder statesman. He's a community leader.
But he may be, but what he talks is still disowned by the Muslim community. I mean, he has a position of power. That's true.
Why?
I wouldn't put it... Well, I suppose it's just inherited, Mickey. He's been there for so long. I mean, I agree with you that it's about time that people like him moved on and let others come in their place. But, and as the youngsters kind of come through, hopefully much less of this will happen. I mean, the elder statesmen, they obviously have spent a lot of their life abroad and some of their life here. And so there is a mixture of identities and a mixture of cultures there. But for those of us who have been brought up here and are now assuming those positions of responsibility, then I think, it's beholden onto us to put statements out. And we do try, Nicky, but unfortunately our statements are just not as attractive as the statements of another. I mean, your earlier callers have already pointed out that people like al-Muhajirun are just such a tiny proportion of the Muslim community that they have nowhere to go. But because they shout out so loud and they say preposterous things which none of us lay claim to, they're given airtime. And, and they do feed off each other, Nicky. People like the Al-Muhajirun and people like, the EDL, they feed off each other because they're both really, almost mirror images. They feed off extremism. They feed.
And do you believe what the police have told us today, that the groups like EDL radicalise young Muslims and send them into the arms of radical extremists? Similarly, groups like Al-Mujahirun will radicalise people and send them into the arms of the EDL.
Well, first of all, there's no excuse for either. Okay, let me underline that. I don't care what the provocation is. There is absolutely no justification for you going to the extreme of the EDL or the extreme of, the people like Al-Muhajirun. Do they feed off each other? Yes, they do. Because they invite that total stereotyping, that total kind of hysteria, which makes other like-minded people bubble. And so, yes, of course they feed off each other, but is there any excuse for it? Absolutely not.
Julia, do you want to come back?